Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Dakota On-Chain. This is episode 3, and I am thrilled to be joined today by Dominic Folino, the president of the PA Blockchain Coalition. Dom, welcome so much. I'll just read your quick bio here, all right?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Dom founded the Pennsylvania Blockchain Coalition, or PBC. It's a nonprofit organization comprised of blockchain allies and users in various industries working together to create a wider acceptance of this crucial technology. The PBC focuses on education and advocacy regarding blockchain technology at the state and federal levels. Dom is also the president of Spectrum Strategies. Spectrum focuses on government affairs, business development, and blockchain advocacy. Before founding PBC, Dominic worked in-house at a financial services firm for nearly a decade. He helped manage the firm's political, lobbying, charitable, and community initiatives, including the Political Action Committee and its charitable affiliate. He began his political career working for various campaigns around Pennsylvania. Dom also served as chief of staff to a member of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. Cryptocurrency and blockchain are a passion of Dom's. He's involved in various groups, including the steering committee of the U.S. Blockchain Coalition, and is an advisor to the New Jersey, Connecticut, and Virginia blockchain councils. Dom has spoken and moderated numerous panels on the subject. He's a graduate of LaSalle University and holds an MBA from Villanova University. It has been quite a week in blockchain, Dom, and
it absolutely has.
We didn't time this interview. This has been just purely providential, the timing of it, having somebody who's working with the legislative bodies of both the state and, hopefully some of the federal level too.
Yes,
is that
sir.
correct?
Yes.
So around making or informing and educating legislators around blockchain technology and how we can get some kind of regulation around. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
All right. So what got you started into the blockchain technology?
So as you mentioned in my bio, I worked in financial services for a while, and on our firm represented investors from all over the country, and the folks out in California would come back and tell us about Bitcoin. And I had no idea at the time what it was. And I really took an interest in Bitcoin and then ultimately blockchain. And when I left the financial services firm, I was able to start the Pennsylvania Blockchain Coalition, and I got connected with a number of folks from other states. And during the infrastructure bill last June, Senator Toomey was instrumental in helping to redefine what we're trying to redefine what a broker was. And I spoke to a number of these states, and it occurred to me that I need the Blockchain Coalition of Pennsylvania to be more of just me in my home office. And that's the point in which the coalition was born.
Yeah. So get into that, the Blockchain Coalition. So obviously it's not just you in your office anymore.
Correct.
So it serves to educate, at least in Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania state legislative body?
Yes, correct. So
Okay.
our pillars, if you will, are ACE. Advocacy, connection, and education.
Okay.
So the advocacy piece is the legislative piece, and we've testified before some of the committees in the PA State House. We've spoken to a number of legislators just to help really them to understand the connection piece, both to connect legislators with other legislators in other states, but also to connect Pennsylvania and try to build a little bit more of a community. Because as you know, in Pennsylvania, there's the East and the West, but we're trying very hard to bring, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia together. And then obviously the education piece is just doing things like this. And also, if there's any of our member companies that would like education, we help them build out panels. We moderate panels, we participate in panels and things of that nature, but also connect them to, like, for instance, folks on our advisory board.
And you say it's a coalition, meaning it's not just you, it's across multiple companies, as across
Correct.
party lines? Are we talking we're
yes.
trying just to not be partisan here?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes. So it's a 501c6. So it's a nonprofit set up similar to a chamber of commerce, and we're
Right.
a membership organization. And we reached out to some of the companies in Pennsylvania to try to build that larger coalition around blockchain. And as we all know here is we obviously can't divorce ourselves from crypto, but our main focus is the technology. It is blockchain and all the various uses.
So what kind of companies are you seeing getting involved? You don't normally think of Pennsylvania as a tech-heavy state like you think maybe California might be, for example, or even New York, right? So what kind of companies are you seeing joining up with the Pennsylvania Coalition?
Absolutely. So as you know, the Southeast, I'm a Southeast guy, mostly eds and meds. But when you head out west, when you Pittsburgh, you have more of a technology, atmosphere. There's a lot more startups. It's a little more entrepreneurial feel in the tech space. So we're actually seeing, you've obviously seen crypto in the last few years, but you're starting to see companies that are getting the idea around blockchain. You're starting to see, I always use the example of like the Boers, the Diamond Company, things like that. But you're also starting to see things in PA where you can see possibly titles, car titles, things of that nature, anywhere where you can keep a record or ledger. And we've had conversations even with some of the local universities. I don't think we're there yet, but the idea of even keeping transcripts on a blockchain would be something that we'd really like to see happen.
Yeah, so eds and meds, just for everyone's education companies.
Yes,
so
education.
So colleges, would that be correct?
Yes.
Colleges and meds being your hospitals. And
correct.
So,
even IBC, even insurance.
Insurance companies, yeah, absolutely. Right. Very helpful to have those electronic medical records, for example, which
absolutely.
we cannot ever seem to standardize across.
Yes, but you are starting to see that. You're starting to see proof of referrals and proof of insurance being use cased in small particular instances on the blockchain.
Wow, that's fantastic. So we're in the financial industry here, obviously, in Dakota. So, a lot of the applications we've seen so far have mainly involved the ledger of, say, like your cap table, right? Or ownership of a firm, maybe taking a firm into the marketplace without going it through an IPO process, right? You could just tokenize the ownership and sell it that way. It's really interesting to hear other ways that this could be utilized, and that's really driving the Pennsylvania side of things, which is interesting. I wonder how it will. What is the interest of the eds and meds, as you say, like when you're advocating on their behalf, for example?
Well, we don't necessarily advocate on their behalf at this point, but that's the ultimate goal, to try to bring the eds and meds into the community and get to the point where they're more open to blockchain. We're still trying to educate and get folks to understand exactly all the different uses. Right.
So I imagine I'll just say this, proof of work versus proof of stake, for example. Is that something that's important to them, or is this something that more...
I mean, traditionally when we speak about proof of stake and proof of work, we're mostly here in Pennsylvania. We're using it as a mining example.
Right.
Like the proof of stake, we had a number... PA last year, we had a number of larger miners here, but we're also seeing the mining coming, obviously Texas, Georgia, Kentucky, but you're also starting to see it in Ohio, West Virginia, and we'd like to see more of it in Pennsylvania. But as you know, there's a lot of arguments around both proof of stake and proof of work, and the pros and cons of both sides. And obviously, Bitcoin is proof of work.
Yeah, and I know especially with ESG and environmental concerns, proof of stake has become a little bit more of a hot topic versus proof of work, right? Where it's very energy intensive, right?
Absolutely. And I think, as, crypto and Web3 is such a nascent industry, I think it's the opportunity. You'll see a lot of companies struggle to execute on it's ESG, but it's three things, right? It's ESNG is what it should be called. And you'll see certain companies, in my opinion, they definitely get the E right, but they might not get the S or the G right. And I think in the crypto industry, a lot of these newer firms have the opportunity to start with a blank slate and get all three right. Okay. Because we've had a number of conversations about ESG. And as you can imagine, PA, a fossil fuel state. Three letters that no one likes to hear in PA are ES and J.
Yes.
We moderated a panel out in Pittsburgh, and we had a woman who's the treasurer of our coalition, and she did the ESG panel. And I started by saying, all right, no one is allowed to throw anything at our panelists. So, fossil fuels, ESG, but I think it is the way that we have to move. Similar to, I believe that blockchain is the way we have to move. I think, there definitely has to be an ESG component as well.
You were in the House of Representatives, Pennsylvania.
Yes.
They have these amazing stained glass windows along the side of it, right? That pick out all the different industries that made Pennsylvania great, and I believe one of them is coal.
Correct.
And another one is steel. So
absolutely.
I mean, these are not what you would normally think of as ESG things, and these are, ingrained in stained glass above the legislators' heads as they're making decisions.
And also behind the legislators, I personally feel the House chamber is one of the most beautiful chambers in the country.
Gorgeous building.
Having been to other capitals, but again, there's a lot of representation of both coal and steel in that painting over the over lectrum.
Yeah, it's hard to ignore it, right?
Absolutely.
This is what built this place, guys.
Absolutely,
right?
Yes.
And built this state, and it's hard to walk away from just because somebody brings up those 3 letters, right? So, it's fine. So it's hard to not have this kind of conversation, especially around regulation of crypto. This week, I don't usually like to make these conversations so specific to a timeline. However, recent events kind of demand it. FTX blew up this week, earlier this week. So it's, as I said, serendipitous that you're here. We have this guy who's coming in to talk about how he's having these conversations with legislators. I know that personally my phone has blown up this week with people saying, hey, explain this to me. What happened? Seeing that you're kind of putting yourself in the position where you are educating or advocating for, in this case, we'll say with the E of ACE, right? You're educating lawmakers. Have you found that your phone is blowing up, your emails or your box is getting full? So like, what's going on? Can you explain it to me? How can we address this situation? How do we make sure this doesn't happen to anybody in Pennsylvania, for example?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We've had some board members reach out to us, and it's just been a topic of conversation for the last few weeks and beyond that. Just everything with Twitter, and before this we had Do Kwon and Terra. So it's just there's so much going on right now, and we don't know the full story yet. I feel like if I told you something that was fact, well, what I believe to be fact today, tomorrow it'll be wrong, just because this is evolving so quickly. But yeah, I definitely think that this is a call for, the industry's been asking for regulation. And I think this is an opportunity to not over-regulate, because I think that would be a problem. I think that a lot of what this, listen, the folks that are against crypto are saying, see, we told you this was going to happen.
Right.
But the pro-crypto folks aren't necessarily saying we don't want regulation. We're saying we want smart regulation. Right. And you're seeing agencies such as the SEC and the CFTC, regulate by enforcement. I wish I knew who said it, and I wish I could take credit for it, but someone gave the analogy the other day on one of the podcasts I listened to. They said it's like driving down the road and you don't know what the speed limit is until you're pulled over. And that, I think, is what's happening. No one understands the rules of the road and the guidelines. And then you get someone like an FTX that's, headquartered in the Bahamas, that's operating outside of, the purview of these U.S. regulators. And that was a big problem. And, folks in the industry, I've done nothing but listen to podcasts because I assumed it would come up today. And some folks are saying, well, the SEC, the CFTC should have caught this. They were asleep at the wheel. There's a lot of different, I don't know that I agree with that. I can see the points of both sides, but as this evolves, I think you're going to see, a lot of different things come out of this. And I try to see the positives. I like to say I'm an optimist, but obviously this is very bad that people lost their money, and that's never, ever a good thing. But I think this is also going to wake the industry up in regard to more effective corporate governance, part of, ESG, right? Part governance, but also just, capital requirements and transparency around capital.
Yeah. And the great promise of blockchain was to give you that transparency. Transparency
and security.
Right. Transparency and security. And it's a great irony that seems to have neither, at least in this particular case. And again, I agree with your statement. We don't want to say too much because, as you're saying, the facts seem to be very fluid right now.
Correct.
And it's also very dangerous to come up with solutions based upon that kind of incomplete information as well. So when I hear people throwing around solutions like, well, the SEC should do this or, right, again, it's such a new technology to so many people. It's really hard to apply previous laws or previous precedent or whatever we have to this new place that we are. It's a new world, really. And you have a piece of technology that can be a security, it could be a utility, it could be a tokenized version of artwork, it could be anything, right? And whether or not, as you were saying, like it could be proof of title insurance, right?
Yeah,
it could be anything. And so you're going to have you don't want to say, well, can the SEC regulate title insurance? Is the SEC going to regulate electronic medical records when they're on the blockchain? So it's this more of a holistic technology that's going to be reshaping so many different industries in our world, it's hard to point the finger at one regulatory body that we even have today to even work on it.
Yeah, I mean, just to take what you said, to your point about transparency in the industry, you can make the argument that everything in FTX, that's not regulators that caught that. That's blockchain analytics, that's journalists, that's folks in the space, and I think that lends to the transparency. I mean, this is not the best example to use because it's obviously a bad example, but you talked about regulation. I mean, I'm not a regulator. However, I don't know that the Howey tests envisioned Bitcoin or any digital currency for that matter.
Right.
So I think, to the point about legislation, I mean, this could be that moment where we need to start over in a sense, right? And start over. Maybe there's a new agency, right? And I don't know that that's the case. And I know that's some folks think that that's the answer and some folks don't. But I think that we definitely need to work together. And frankly, too, if we don't work together and the U.S. doesn't get it, I've also heard the argument that there was no product like the FTX in the U.S. because the regulators wouldn't allow it. So people had to use foreign entities. And then they're not regulating it. If you were a U.S. citizen and you could figure out a VPN, you could work with this. So, I think that that's the case that everyone, I'm a lobbyist by day, so I understand saying getting everyone to the table to agree is much easier said than done. But I think it's something that needs to happen. I think this needs to change the conversation.
Yeah, and I think it's at least bringing into the public consciousness, right? There's reward. Obviously, everyone knows Bitcoin could make you very rich or has in the past. They also know it can, as they say, wreck you, right?
Yep.
So many of these people have just been wrecked. It's kind of a Wild West, if you will, environment. And you wonder how much capital is still stuck on the sidelines because people just don't have that comfort level, right, of investing in this new industry because, as you say, they don't know what the rules are, right? So if I'm even a hospital, for example, right, how far down the line do I want to get digitizing or putting all of my records onto the blockchain if I think the SEC is going to knock on my door one day and shut me down for not reporting all of these transactions as security transactions that should have had a gain and a loss on it.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
So instead of just operating expense for running my server, which is what I'm doing technically. I mean, if I was going to say I'm running a database, right, on my own private subnet, and I'm paying my fees to run that server, just like I would pay, on a SaaS server that I had for MySQL or, it would be a couple $1,000s a year I pay for run my database, right? You know what I mean?
You're preaching to the choir.
Exactly. So it's very
agree.
difficult.
Yeah.
Your job, I do not envy you your job, Dom. That sounds like
no one ever does.
Well, it just sounds like you have to explain. It's almost you have to take the conversation away from whatever this paradigm we're in now and try to show them look, everything is going to be done in a different way. And so because of that, we have to almost rethink the existing regulations or come up with new ones. So,
and I would also make the argument, not to get too far into the regulatory side of things. I would argue that, there's so much going on with crypto on the federal side. You're going to start to see the states govern themselves. You're going to start to see more legislation at the state level. So even, for instance, when we talk to state legislators, both Republican, Democrat, East, West, many of whom are much more open to the different concepts and understanding that, okay, this could actually move in that direction. Same thing, you've got some universities in Pennsylvania that get it, that are ahead, but you've got a few that aren't really there. But surprisingly, some of the folks that we've spoken to are open to it. They're more open to learning about it because, I have a legislator deck that I do. And, it's like, okay, the PBC is this. And the next slide is blockchain is not cryptocurrency. blockchain is not Bitcoin.
Right.
And then go on to explain that it's the underlying technology and then it has so many uses, and we use, use cases that everyone can identify with, such as Walmart, right? Walmart does uses a blockchain to track their pork and their mango. They may do more than that now, but at the time when I use that as an example, because it's something that everyone can identify with.
Yeah.
If you use some obscure reference to, using Ethereum for X, and someone's going to look at you like you're insane, you have to be able to relate it to, when you go to Walmart Saturday, think about it. That's how they're tracking things, and inventory management and supply chain and, all of these practical uses that you're starting to see. And I think legislators are starting to understand that.
Yeah.
Because we're all looking for ways, especially at budget time, to manage budgets more effectively and to save money for the state and the citizens of every state, not just PA.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously we're mostly focused on PA. But again, it's all about each state and how we can work together.
Yeah. And one of the things I love about how America is structured is that it does allow the states to kind of be a playground for rules.
Absolutely.
And it's really neat to watch certain states that, like, again, trying to stay out of it. It's hard to not have a political conversation with a lobbyist, right? But not to get into whether the morality of it, for example, but for Denver to legalize marijuana, for example, and for this to kind of watch and see what happens. And hey, a fireball from heaven didn't consume them, for example. Like, hey, and look at all the revenue they got, and let's take a look at what happened to their healthcare costs, and driving under the influence, and we can check all the stats and see how it worked for them. And hey, we're somewhat homogenous society with Colorado. We could try that rule here, for example, right? And so it becomes this playground to experiment with these kind of rules. So do you see maybe hesitancy to be the first state to?
Yes.
Like, it sounds like you're also working with New Jersey, Virginia.
Yes.
Connecticut, I think I saw, right?
Yes.
So are you like, what's kind of what's the feel of those states?
So when we formed the USBC, the United States Blockchain Coalition, it was the idea of bringing everyone together, because the other side of it is, just to take a quick step back to your point, the other side of it is we also don't have to reinvent the wheel, to your point, right? So is legislation that passed in California and Washington necessarily going to be the same as Ohio and Pennsylvania? Most likely it's not. But to your point, yeah, we may be closer to a North Carolina or maybe a Colorado on certain things. And I think that that's right. I think that the states, some states want to jump right in, others do not. Like, you look at like a West Virginia, for instance. I mean, they're really a leader in the blockchain space. And I'd really, that's something that I say to legislators in PA. There's no reason that we in PA can't be leaders as well. And we can't legislate in a vacuum. We have to understand this is what's occurring in other states. And this is legislation, frankly, that works.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, look, if you want to get into politics, and I'm going to get on my soapbox, I would love to see, blockchain voting. And I don't think it's
that would be tremendous.
I don't think it's that far out, but imagine transparency, fraud. You couldn't see that Dominic Folino voted, but you could see that voter 82645 voted, right?
Yes.
I mean, there are many jokes in Philadelphia about voting early and often, but if you could actually, provide that transparency and security, and we're not there yet. But some states
go a long way.
Some states are looking into piloting it.
It would go a long way to disabuse a lot of the theories you're having around the elections. Correct. So whenever you get a result you don't like, sometimes you question the process. It happens in every game we play, right? So anytime I play with my kids, they don't win, or I don't win, I don't question the rules when I don't win, because I usually let them win. But when they don't win, they want to say, "Hey, that wasn't fair because X, Y, Z." Right?
My son just changes the rules. He's convinced that if he starts to lose, he adds rules or subtracts rules, so it benefits him.
Yeah, of course, naturally. Right. So we call that the Tom Brady effect.
Yes, well, we never see that in politics. The rules never get changed.
Never. Well, thank goodness our politicians are so moral and upright and above board and all things. So grateful for them. So I kind of lost my thought a little bit on that, but I think we wanted to. It's so good to hear that you want to like encourage them to be leaders in that space. And coming back to what you're saying with West Virginia, it allows lawmakers to almost take that Hippocratic oath of do no harm. So you can look to see, hey, West Virginia did this and nothing bad happened.
Absolutely.
Right. In fact, look at all the industries moving into X state because they made this, blockchain friendly rule. Right?
Yeah, and
Look
it
at all
also
the mining, for example, taking place. Look at all the wealth that's pouring into the state now because of this. I'm sorry.
That's exactly right. And that's, I think, when you can provide to a legislator a use case. And listen, as I said, some folks get it, some legislators get it, some don't want to get it. But in Pennsylvania, the members that we met with are absolutely open to it. And I think if you can say, look, it's happening in Ohio, it's happening in New Jersey, and this is what they're doing, and this is how they've done it, and this is a copy of the bill. There were some bills in PA that I didn't think were great, but I was able to say, okay, look, if you look at, say, North Carolina, they've done this bill, and here are the different things that they've applied, and it works. And so if it's there, right, and especially when you can start to propose some of these bills that aren't affecting the budget, so they're not costing money, they're actually saving the Commonwealth money, every legislator wants to hear that.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's really bipartisan. I mean, I can't imagine this becoming a party issue. Do you find that that's happening?
Yes. I mean, I think you see it often. I don't think you are starting to see, some of the bipartisan folks working together. Like you see it with like Senator Toomey, who, we're obviously not happy about losing. And you see it with like Lummis and Gillibrand on some of their legislation working together. But you will see, like Elizabeth Warren is just very against, this technology and crypto and energy use around mining, and talks about all the bad actors, and, Do Kwon and Sam Bankman-Fried are now they're poster children for this is what happens with bad actors. But are we going to stop banking because of Bernie Madoff and Enron?
Yeah.
I mean, there are bad actors in every industry, and it's just that this is such a new industry that you immediately point to the bad actors and say, "See, we told you."
Yeah.
But it's any industry.
Yeah.
And there are countless. When we talk about criminals and crime, I mean, for the most part, criminals still use cash.
Absolutely.
I don't know what the statistic is, but the crime is somewhere under 1%. I haven't looked at the statistic in a bit, but crime and crypto, it's all 1%. Everyone uses the example of the Silk Road. They got caught because they were using blockchain technology.
And
you
it's
could
all
see it,
trackable,
right,
and completely open to everyone to see. So
just like 50 other things, that documentaries in my Netflix watch list.
Yeah, I know personally, if I was going to be a criminal, which I would never be, but if I can help it, the last place I would try to take my cash is to a place where everyone can see where my money is, how much I'm moving around, right? The address of the wallet.
Yes.
Right. So to me, it's like, hey, more criminal activity on blockchain is actually better for regulators.
Absolutely.
Not worse. You can recover the funds. You can freeze the wallets, right? There's ways that you can actually blacklist wallets now on exchanges. There's now they're trying to work on ways to get around that, but the fact is it's still on the open chain, right?
Correct,
Once
yes.
you're on that blockchain, everything is open and transparent, and you can see all the activity that person's doing with it. So, it's not like a numbered Swiss account. Let's put it that way.
I agree. I mean, it's not the same, but it's almost like if you walk into your corner bank and put a bunch of cash in and do a deposit slip.
Yeah.
It's very similar to that. And again, criminals aren't using banks either.
No.
So I think it's any argument, right? It's there's pros and cons, but I think both sides. I hope that this. I think in the coming weeks and months, it will draw battle lines over what's going on with FTX, especially as things start to come out.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think it'll give the industry a chance to shine and really come together and say, like, look, we want to do this, we want to do this, and get some help from the SEC and the CFTC or whatever regulatory body you're dealing with.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm trying to say with it not becoming a party issue, I don't see it. I don't see, say, like one of the two major parties we have that we have to choose between, putting that on their platform as we're the pro blockchain technology and they're the anti-blockchain technology. It sounds like you have like Loomis and you'll have a Toomey. You'll have an Elizabeth Warren and you might have like I don't know where Mitch McConnell stands, but I presume he's more old money, right? So
Patrick McHenry, for instance.
Sorry, thank you, Patrick
he's
McHenry.
more on the...
So like you're going to have people on both sides of the aisle kind of split on this issue, but also finding common ground on this issue, right? So you're going to have
Absolutely.
You're going to have, in the sense that it won't necessarily matter if you've got a, let's say, a House on one party's hands and a Senate in another party's hands. A bill, something like this, could still make it through. Right? If it's done properly, then everybody can get on the same page because it's something that should help everybody in your state or in your country. Is that a fair statement? Do you think?
Agree.
Okay.
I agree. Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, there's definitely both sides, right? You've got your advocates, Democrats, Republicans. You've got you've got folks that are against it as well. So
Sure.
I agree with you.
Yeah, it's not like I'm trying to draw a comparison to like other issues that are more hot.
Yeah, but you want to stay away from this.
What's the pro-union party, right? Or
right.
what's the anti-union party, right? You can kind of feel like there's a battle line that's been drawn across party lines, but I don't feel that for blockchain.
I hope you're right. I think that's right today, and I hope that remains.
Let's hope.
I hope that remains the case.
I think that's true. I would hope this is something we can all get behind.
Yes.
Right? It's almost like there's a pro-internet party and there's an anti-internet party, right? I don't think it's like we all want the internet. We just maybe want to regulate e-commerce a little bit and find out, right? How do we tax
I think that's
these,
right. Yeah.
these
I think that's right. We can all agree on the concept, but as you go down and dig down on each issue,
it's like
each issue you'll draw party lines.
I understand. Okay. All right. So if blockchain's a baseball game, or the acceptance of blockchain is a baseball game, what inning would you say we're in here?
So I live and die and try to read everything related to blockchain in this space and everything. And from talking to everyone in this space, I would say it's in the seventh. However, from talking to the average person, and I had a very intelligent individual say to me, well, not long ago, well, so is the environmental impact of mining because we dig into the earth? And I thought to myself, okay, you know what? The general public, I would argue, is in the very early innings. I would say, first or second even. We'll say the second. But I really start to think that people don't quite understand it. I talk to folks like you and folks that are asking me questions and I think that are asking about the industry and friends of mine who, invested in crypto 5-6 years ago, longer in some instances. Well, not much longer, but my point is I think generally it's very early. It's not late. It's not late at all.
Yeah. It feels to me, since I lived through, you probably did too.
Well, very quickly, internet, I would argue that the blockchain, moving blockchain into the state, we're still in the pregame there. Everybody's still warming up. That's what I would argue on the states.
On the state level. Okay.
So yes, I gave you the most complex answer I possibly could to what inning are we in.
It makes sense because obviously we don't all move at the same pace,
Correct.
Right? You have people that are early adopters and you have people that are much later on and they kind of want to watch and make sure that guy doesn't get killed when he, tried that new berry that he ate,
Right.
And it's like, all right. And then now his friend just ate that same berry. It's like, okay, he didn't die right away. I'm going to give it a few more days,
Right.
Make sure it doesn't get really sick. And then I'll eat that berry kind of thing. It's hard to kind of speak generally about society when it comes to adopting a new thing. Right. And it makes sense. I think it's pretty funny. I feel personally like, since you and I lived through the internet revolution, right? When dial-up came.
We all remember that sound.
Well, yeah. And, it was such a pain just to get online, right? Just to kind of get connected to everything. And it feels like we're still there with the on-ramps and then off-ramping things either into the blockchain space and getting it back off. I feel like the on-ramps and off-ramps still have a lot of work to do. You also at that same time had that huge internet bubble where like anything with like a .com
right
just went to the moon, as they say in our industry, right? And a lot of it just fell to pieces. And yet everyone was still saying this is the future and you're going to want to have a website. And if you have a store, you're going to want to have a domain, a Dakota.com, for example, as I shamelessly plug our company website. I feel like we're still kind of at that stage where everyone's kind of telling you this is coming, this is the future, and we're there. Does that seem to ring true to you too, or?
Absolutely. The example I use, for instance, I have a 12 and a 9-year-old. They're used to everything moving so very quickly. They have iPhones, they have iPads. The fact that, I had a desktop, and when I wrote a paper, I had to go to the library and actually check books out and cite them. Obviously they cite their internet articles, but it's a lot different, right? But I use the example, like my father, he says to me, I was at the grocery store the other day, and they had a Bitcoin ATM. Like, what am I going to do with a bunch of coins? And it's like, but that's the idea. It's and we use money, right? Like, so we trade it fur and gold, and which are commodities, which is what the agriculture committee, but that's a whole other story. But my point is, and then we moved in, no one thought that checks would catch on, and cash and credit cards. Now I never have it. Even, I don't even keep, I used to keep change in my car for meters. Now everything's on an app. And I think that, to your point, all of this will catch on. And it's, my kids, that'll just be what it is. You're going to want your medical records, and you're going to walk into the doctor. And look, the medical industry, they still use fax machines.
I know, it's horrible.
One of my favorite shows is Ted Lasso, and there was an episode when he asked the concierge for a fax machine. He says, "Oh yeah, I'll get one from 1985," and then he says, "Oh wait, you're serious?" But that's the technology, and it all moves forward. But my kids will just, when they need their medical records, they'll just have them on their phone.
Yeah.
Any transaction, it'll all be on their phones.
Yeah.
In a perfect world, they're not there yet, but I'd love that. The day that they start college, their transcripts are on the blockchain, and then they can absolutely have them throughout if they should transfer, grad school, and so on. Yeah. But I think that's where we will get. But I agree with you, we are slow. It's the same way, everyone, you and I probably had AOL accounts, right? But then we were ahead of the game. We had email.
I don't tell anyone about my AOL days.
Right.
I was too cool for AOL Instant Messenger. I could have never had that account.
Right. But and so I think it'll all catch on.
Yeah.
Even in the early days of, I'm going to say it, I'm going to date myself, but MySpace, right?
Yeah.
But now no one would have thought that social would catch on like that.
Yeah.
Between MySpace to Facebook to LinkedIn to TikTok to Snapchat to, every other app that my kid hides from me that he uses to talk to his friends,
Right. And the rate of adoption is accelerating.
Absolutely.
Of these things, for sure.
Yes. Something could, I feel like, again, I feel like TikTok caught on a Tuesday, and then by the weekend, everyone, had it.
Yeah. When you think about the rate of adoption of high-speed internet versus dial-up, for example, that took years.
Right. Or even smartphones.
And then from there, Facebook took months, or, whatever. So TikTok takes months, right? So you have this idea that once the technology starts to build momentum, the things on top of it, the killer apps, if you will, they just really snowball the adoption, right? Because that's what got grandma on the internet, was eBay. Right. It wasn't the fact that she could go to yahoo.com and check out the sports section, for example, right? That didn't get her online. She has no need for it, right? But once she can see what her daughter's doing at college, or, connect on Facebook, for example, or start to shop, right, at eBay, and fill up her China collection that she's never been able to complete from her wedding day back in the 1960s or 40s, right? Now it's like, wow, this has use to me. This has real application to me, and they'll do what they need to do to get to adopt the technology. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think hopefully this adoption will be quicker, right?
Yeah.
You talk about, without getting too far into it, you talk about the internet, right? And first it was maybe you were just checking the Philly score, to seeing what your child's doing in college, to shopping, to checking Facebook to connect with somebody you went to high school with 20 years ago. But I think in this space, in the Web3 space, we're staying focused on cryptocurrency and blockchain, but think, NFTs, all of these different things. I did Columbia House, right? Like, they emailed me my CD, and then we went to the Napster, and then now you get a Spotify or an Apple Music or whatever it is, and you have it on your phone, and you have music at your fingertips, and you can download a song in seconds.
Yeah, you don't think about it
right.
anymore.
And but think about, what NFTs can do to the art world, and to, any ownership. Just take it completely out, or or fundraising.
It could be a proof of identity. I mean, imagine getting a DocuSign that's been signed by an NFT of that guy's signature, and you know because he owns that NFT, it had to have come from him.
Right. And
right?
think
So
about
like nobody could have forged this signature on this document because it's been signed back by the blockchain.
again all of the fraud that you can eliminate.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, there's a lot of things that this can do that I think that we're just scratching the surface, right? It just needs to be built.
Yeah, I agree.
It's tremendous. So listen, I this has been fantastic. How do companies? It sounds like a lot of what you're doing, at least in Pennsylvania, is eds and meds. How do other companies get involved with the PA Blockchain Coalition, or even the U.S. Blockchain Coalition? So because our reach is going to be a little bit wider than just Pennsylvania, for example. Like if anybody would say like even in Virginia, New Jersey, Connecticut wants to get in touch with you, would that still be the Blockchain Coalition? Or?
So yes, the best way, honestly, is to just come through us at the PA Blockchain Coalition, which is pablockchain.org. All of our information's on there. We're doing a little work on the websites, but you can go through at our inquiry section right now. But we're also going to have links to the USBC and some of the other blockchain groups that we work with, so it'll be easy to get in touch with for folks.
All right, perfect. Well, Dom, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great. I enjoyed it.
Like I said, we couldn't have timed this any better with, you're like a silver lining to a very dark cloud in the crypto industry right now, and it's been.
I've never been called a silver lining, so thank you. That just made my day.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate it, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Great.